Am I the a-hole for telling my brother's fiancé about his past infidelity right before their wedding? I never imagined I'd end up here, but I need an outside perspective. I, 25F, might have just blown up my family. My brother, let's call him Mark, 28M, is supposed to get married in 2 days to his fiancée, Tina, 27F. Last night, I told Tina that Mark cheated on her a year ago. I told her right before their wedding, and now everything is chaos. My family is furious, Mark hates me, Tina is devastated. And I'm sitting here wondering if I did the right thing or if I'm the world's biggest asshole. Some background. Mark and I have always been fairly close. He's my older brother, and growing up I looked up to him. He's the golden child in our family. Charming, successful, always had a way of skating through consequences. Tina has been with Mark for about 3 years, and she's practically family already. I love Tina. She's sweet, she treated me like a sister from day one, and I was so excited to have her officially as my sister-in-law. They got engaged last year, and everyone was over the moon. About 8 months ago, I discovered something that made my stomach drop. Mark cheated on Tina. It happened during his bachelor party trip. Yes, before the wedding, but after they were engaged. The worst part? I found out completely by accident. I was using Mark's iPad that he'd lent me, and a message popped up. A flirty, clearly intimate message from a woman named Stacy. My heart sank. At first I thought, no, it must be a misunderstanding. But then I saw the rest of the conversation, and it was explicit. They were reminiscing about the amazing night they had and how it shouldn't happen again. It was clear as day. My brother slept with this woman while engaged to Tina. I felt sick reading it. I wish I hadn't seen those messages, but I did. Immediately, a million thoughts flooded my mind. Was this ongoing? Was it truly just that one night? Does anyone else know? I was angry at Mark, and also terrified about what it meant for Tina. She had no idea and was cheerfully planning her wedding, completely oblivious. I confronted Mark the next day. I drove over to his apartment, iPad in hand, shaking with rage. I remember literally shaking as I held up the iPad and said, "What the hell is this, Mark?" He went white as a sheet. Mark isn't often speechless, but in that moment he looked like a kid caught stealing candy. He tried to play dumb at first. "What are you talking about?" But I shoved the messages in his face. I was crying, yelling, everything. I asked him how he could do this to Tina, and told him he needed to tell her immediately, or I would. Mark begged me not to tell her. I'll never forget the panic in his voice. He actually started tearing up, saying it was a one-time mistake, a stupid drunken fling at his bachelor party that meant nothing. According to him, he was wasted. His friends, and I have feelings about these so-called friends, had hired some women to party with them. He claimed it was just that one night, that he regretted it instantly, and he swore up and down he cut off contact. Obviously, that last part was a lie, because the messages I saw weren't from that night. They were from 2 weeks later. When I pointed that out, Mark looked trapped and then admitted she had reached out to reminisce, and he responded against his better judgment. He insisted he never slept with her again after that one time. I asked why he kept the messages. He said he didn't think to delete because he never thought anyone would see them. Idiot. We fought for hours. I was so angry at him for betraying Tina. Tina, who is the kindest person, who trusted him completely. Mark kept saying he knew he messed up and that he'd never do it again. He was practically on his knees, asking me to keep this secret. He said if I told her, it would destroy her and also destroy him. He was terrified of losing Tina and also terrified of our parents finding out. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to hurt Tina either. The thought of her face when she learned the truth. It broke my heart. She had been talking excitedly to me just the day before about her wedding dress fitting. I was so conflicted. I told Mark that Tina deserves to know. She has a right to know what she's signing up for. He swore it was a one-time lapse and that he would take it to his grave rather than hurt her with it. It meant nothing I loved Tina more than anything. Telling her would only hurt her, he argued. He tried every angle. He even said he would confess to her after they were married, like he just wanted to wait until after the wedding because everything was already planned and paid for, families coming, etc. I think at one point he actually said, "Please, don't punish Tina for my mistake. She's been dreaming of this day." I shot back, "Her dream is based on a lie, Mark. You did that, not me." Eventually, I reluctantly agreed not to tell her right then. I know, some will say I'm an asshole for ever agreeing to keep it secret at all. Maybe I am. But I was trying to figure out the lesser of two evils. It was an awful position. Either destroy Tina's world now, or potentially let her go into a marriage without the truth. Mark promised me he would never cheat again and that he would become the husband she deserves. He looked pathetic and sincere, and I wanted so badly to believe him. I also foolishly hoped maybe he'd come to his senses and tell her himself before the wedding. Well, months went by. I kept waiting for Mark to do the right thing. But as the wedding got closer, it became clear he had no intention of ever telling her. He basically pretended that conversation with me never happened. Meanwhile, I was eaten up with guilt every time I saw Tina, and I saw her a lot. She would ask me to help with wedding planning tasks, we'd grab coffee, and she'd be gushing about how excited she was to marry Mark, and I had to smile and nod while knowing what I knew. It was torture. I started having stress dreams about it. I drank more wine than usual at night just to quiet my brain. Every time I looked at Mark, I was disgusted. Sometimes I could barely speak to him at family dinners, and my parents thought I was moody or something. I couldn't tell them either, or so I thought at the time. About 2 months ago, I actually tried to subtly talk to my mom about Mark and Tina, feeling her out about hypothetical infidelity. I asked, "Mom, do you think Tina and Mark are really happy? Do you think they tell each other everything?" My mom was puzzled, and I ended up chickening out of saying more. I was afraid if I told my parents, they'd force Mark to tell Tina, or, conversely, they'd pressure me to keep quiet to avoid a scandal. I wasn't ready for that showdown, so I stayed silent. In hindsight, I regret not at least telling Mom then. Maybe it would have forced the issue earlier. Fast forward to last week. We're 1 week before the wedding. Tensions and emotions are high, but for the most part, everything seems on track. Except I am getting more and more anxious. I pulled Mark aside 5 days before the wedding, at a family barbecue of all places, and asked if he really was going to marry her without telling her the truth. Mark glared at me and basically told me to drop it. He said, "I'm not ruining my marriage over a stupid mistake. It would do more harm than good to tell her." I got angry and said it's not about you. She deserves honesty, so she can make an informed choice. He then said something that really stuck with me. Informed choice? She'd choose to leave. Exactly. So you want to ruin this over something that will never happen again? I love her and we're happy. Just let it be, please. I felt so frustrated. It was like talking to a wall. Mark was just begging me to be complicit in his lie. The worst part is, he tried to guilt trip me. He said if I told her now, with the wedding so close, I'd be responsible for blowing up not just their lives, but our family, and even the other family, Tina's parents, etc., who paid for a lot of the wedding. He said I'd basically be setting off a bomb, and years of planning and dreaming would go to waste. I told him he set the bomb when he cheated, and every day that passed without honesty was just the timer ticking down. He walked away from me then, really upset, and we didn't finish the conversation. For the next few days I was a nervous wreck. I knew in my heart Mark wasn't going to tell her. The bomb metaphor I used kept replaying in my head. It was going to blow up one way or another. Either I detonated it now, or it might go off later in their marriage. Imagine if Tina found out years later. That thought haunted me too. I felt damned if I do, damned if I don't. I confided in my boyfriend and a close friend about it, and both of them had the same reaction. She needs to know, but you should have told her sooner. Telling her right before the wedding is going to be catastrophic. I know, I knew it then too. But earlier I was trying to respect Mark's wishes, and then I kept hoping he'd do it on his own. And then I was cowardly afraid of the explosion. Now here I was last minute, with this ticking bomb in my hands. Finally, 2 days before the wedding, which was last night, we had the rehearsal dinner. This was supposed to be a joyful, casual dinner with immediate family and the bridal party before the big day. I went there with this heavy feeling in my chest, like I was walking to the gallows. I told myself I'd gauge the situation, maybe find a private moment with Mark one last time, or even with Tina. Throughout the dinner, I watched Mark toast with Tina, smiling like everything was perfect. I watched Tina's radiant face, so in love and excited. I looked at my parents beaming, her parents laughing with mine, everyone so happy. And I felt absolutely ill. I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't stay silent and watch her walk down the aisle, not knowing. I just couldn't. My conscience wouldn't let me. After the main course, people were milling around, getting dessert, chatting. I caught Mark when he was coming out of the restroom and pulled him into a side hallway. I quietly said, "I'm telling her. I'm sorry, but I am." He knew immediately what I meant. His face contorted with anger and panic. He whispered sharply, "Don't you effing dare, my name." We rarely fight like this, and hearing him say that to me, I almost lost my nerve. He grabbed my arm and actually looked scared, not just angry. He said, "If you do this, I will never forgive you. You're my sister. Don't do this to me." I had tears in my eyes. I hissed back, "I'm not doing anything to you. You did this. I'm doing this for Tina. She deserves honesty. I gave you so many chances, Mark." He was shaking his head, saying, "It was one mistake. Why are you trying to ruin my life? We're happy. It will never happen again." I said, "Maybe you're right. Maybe it never happens again. But you still did it, and she has a right to know who she's marrying." He threatened me. He said, "If you tell her now, you're not my sister anymore." That hurt like hell. I think I started quietly sobbing at that point. I just said, "I'm sorry, I have to." And I walked away from him as he whispered, "Don't you effing dare," again under his breath. I went straight to find Tina. My heart was pounding so loud I thought I'd pass out. I pulled her aside and said I needed to talk to her privately. We stepped out into the venue's coat room, where it was quiet. I was literally trembling and started tearing up immediately, which made her concerned. She was like, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She probably thought I was having a breakdown about the wedding stress or something. I just blurted it out. I said something like, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt. But I can't let you marry Mark without you knowing." Her eyes got wide and she looked terrified. I realized I was starting in a really dramatic way that probably made her think Mark was dying or something, so I just said it. "Mark cheated on you last year." She blinked, like she didn't comprehend, so I kept talking, fast, word vomiting. At his bachelor party weekend, he slept with someone. I found out afterward. I thought he would tell you. I begged him to, but he hasn't, and now the wedding is here. I'm so sorry, Tina. I am so sorry. Tina just stared at me, frozen. Then she sort of laughed like I had to be joking. She said, "What are you talking about?" I could see her start to shake. She asked me if I was mistaken. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe I misheard something. She was in shock, not able to process that this could be real. So I told her everything. How I saw the messages, confronted Mark, what he told me. I even showed her the one screenshot I had snapped back when I first found the messages. I did that in case he deleted them and tried to deny. And thank God I did, because he did delete them later. I never wanted to have to use it, but in that moment I felt she needed proof. When I showed her, I saw the color drain from her face. She just kept saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." Then she started to cry, like this deep, gut-wrenching sob. I will never forget that sound. It broke something in me. I started crying too, apologizing to her over and over. I told her I only found out after it happened and that I wanted to tell her sooner. I was just hoping Mark would come clean on his own. She asked me, "How long have you known?" And when I admitted it was about 8 months, her face, God, I feel so awful. She looked at me almost like I betrayed her too, by not telling her immediately. She said, 8 months. You've been around me all this time and never told me? Why? I tried to explain that I was under pressure by Mark, that I was hoping he would do it himself. She was just crying and said, "I trusted you." "You're my friend. Why didn't you tell me then?" I had no good answer except I was trying to do the right thing, and it was complicated. She was understandably so hurt and angry at both of us. She eventually just said, "I need to talk to Mark. I need to hear him say it." She wiped her eyes and squared her shoulders like she was gathering strength. Then she walked out of the coat room back toward the dining room. I followed a bit behind, not sure what to do. Next thing I know, I hear raised voices. Tina had found Mark in the main room, in front of our families and the bridal party. She basically walked up to him and said loudly, "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't cheat on me." The room went silent. Mark looked like a deer in headlights. I wasn't in the room yet. I was hovering at the doorway, but I could see them. Mark glanced around at everyone staring, and then at me by the door. His face twisted in fury, and he shouted, "You couldn't stay out of this, could you?" Tina grabbed his arm and practically yelled, "So it's true." At this point, everyone is freaking out, like, what is going on? My mom stood up and was like, "What's happening? What's this about cheating?" Tina was crying and demanding Mark answer her. Mark just kept glaring at me and yelling, "Why would you do this? It was nothing. It meant nothing." Which is basically an admission. Tina slapped him. Yes, she actually slapped him across the face in front of everyone. He just stood there, and she screamed, "How could you? After all we've been through." After all I've done for you." By now, Tina's parents rushed over, and my parents did too. My dad looks at me and demands, "Is this true? Did you know about this?" And all eyes turned to me. I felt like I was going to throw up. I managed to say that Mark admitted to me he cheated that one time, and that I told Tina because she deserved to know before the wedding. My mom burst into tears. She literally started crying and saying, "How could you do this? How could you do this now?" I'm not sure if she was saying that to me or to Mark, maybe both. Mark started yelling at me that I had betrayed him. Tina was sobbing uncontrollably, her mom was holding her, and her dad was glaring daggers at Mark. It was absolute chaos. The restaurant staff was staring, the bridal party awkwardly frozen. One of Tina's bridesmaids came and took her away to the bathroom to calm her down. Mark tried to follow, and Tina's dad blocked him, basically telling him to stay the hell away from her. My parents then pulled Mark aside, and I could hear my mom hiss, "How could you cheat on her? What is wrong with you?" So at least her anger was at him too, not just me. Mark was just in meltdown mode, saying it was a mistake, begging them to help him fix it. My father. I've never seen my father so angry. He was quiet, but his face was red, and he looked at Mark with such disappointment. And then, there's me. I was kind of standing off to the side, tears streaming down my face, feeling like the villain and also, somehow the only sane person, all at once. Mark eventually stormed over to me and got in my face, in front of our dad. He said, "This is your fault. This is all your fault. I told you not to say anything. Why couldn't you just keep your effing mouth shut?" My dad actually stepped between us and shouted, "Enough!" which startled both of us because Dad doesn't yell. He told Mark to go outside and cool off. Mark pointed at me and said, "You are not my sister anymore," and then he walked out on his own engagement rehearsal dinner, slamming the door. I just collapsed into a chair, crying. My mom was crying too, torn between comforting me and going after her son. She gave me this wounded look that I can't get out of my head, like I had broken her heart. Then she went to go check on Tina with the other women. My dad sat next to me and sighed. He said quietly, "You should have told us or told her earlier." I just sobbed that I didn't know what to do. I tried to do the right thing. He patted my shoulder, but he looked so devastated. The night ended in disaster, obviously. Tina left with her parents. She could barely even look at me or anyone. Mark drove off to who knows where. My parents and I were left to settle the bill, and apologies to the restaurant staff for the scene. It was mortifying and heartbreaking. Now it's the next day. The wedding was supposed to be tomorrow. It's definitely not happening, at least not now. Invitations to 150 guests, thousands of dollars, months of planning, all up in smoke. Tina hasn't officially announced anything yet, but I'm sure she will once she can speak without crying. Mark is at a friend's house. I think the one who planned the bachelor party. I have a lot of choice words for that guy, but that's another story. My mom is not speaking much to me. She's just holed up in her room, probably crying or just in shock. My dad oscillates between telling me I did the right thing and then saying, "But the timing." I feel like absolute crap. Part of me is furious at Mark for putting all of us in this situation with his stupid, selfish actions. Part of me is heartbroken for Tina. I checked on her through a text, but she only replied saying she doesn't know if she can ever speak to either of us again. She said, "I just need to think." I told her I understand and I'll give her space, but that I am here for her if she needs anything, and that I truly am sorry for the pain she's in. She hasn't responded, which I get. And then there's the part of me that feels guilty, because I dropped this bomb at the worst possible moment. I keep second-guessing. Should I have told her earlier? Absolutely, yes, probably. I should have told her as soon as I found out, or at least sooner than the literal eve of the wedding. Or maybe some people think I should have stayed out of it entirely. There are voices in my head saying, "You ruined your brother's life and possibly your relationship with him forever. You humiliated our family in front of her family. You embarrassed Tina by revealing it so publicly." I never wanted it to come out in that public way. I tried to do it privately with her, but things blew up. Could I have handled it better? Definitely. But if I hadn't said anything at all, she'd be a married woman thinking her husband was faithful when he wasn't. I keep going in circles. Did I do the right thing in principle but at the wrong time? Am I actually the villain for not telling her sooner, essentially forcing it to happen at the worst moment? I feel like an asshole for hurting her so much and causing this much drama in one fell swoop. I feel like an asshole for betraying my brother's secret, even though he's the one who created that awful secret. I feel like maybe I'm not an asshole for believing that she deserved honesty, no matter the timing. But I don't know, I'm too close to it. My head is a mess. This morning my brother sent me a single text. I hope you're happy. Don't ever talk to me again. That's it. My own brother hates me. My mom hasn't said a word to me beyond just a blank look. My dad says I should lay low and give it time, but he's clearly distraught too. So here I am, internet strangers. Am I the asshole for telling my brother's fiancé about his infidelity right before their wedding? Was it the ultimate unforgivable sabotage or a necessary truth she deserved to know? I honestly was trying to do the right thing, but I feel like I handled it in the worst way possible. My heart is broken for everyone involved. I don't know what to do from here. TLDR, my brother cheated on his fiancée. I told her the truth 2 days before their wedding because he refused to. It blew up the wedding and my family. Everyone's devastated and angry. I might have saved her from a dishonest marriage, but I possibly destroyed my relationship with my brother and family in the process. Am I the asshole? Update 1. First off, thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. I didn't get to reply to anyone. Things have been intense, but I did read the responses. It was a pretty mixed bag. Some people said I did the right thing, some said I was the asshole for the timing, others said everyone sucks here. Fair. I kind of agree with all of it. Anyway, it's been a few days, and I wanted to share what's happened since. The wedding, as you can guess, did not happen. The official word that went out was that the wedding was postponed indefinitely. Tina's family sent an email to all the guests, since it was so last minute, simply stating that, due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding is not taking place as scheduled. I'm sure gossip is flying among the extended family and friends, but the core issue, Mark's cheating, has been kept relatively private to just close family and friends for now. The day after the rehearsal blow-up was supposed to be the wedding day. Instead of getting dressed in a bridesmaid gown, I was supposed to be a bridesmaid. I spent the morning at my apartment, on the phone with my dad, and crying. My mom wasn't speaking to me directly, but I heard from Dad that she was an absolute wreck. She went to bed crying and woke up crying. She's furious at Mark for what he did, but she's also upset with me for how I handled it. According to Dad, Mom kept saying, "Why did she have to do this now? Why not earlier? Why not later? Why like this?" She's not exactly wrong. The timing made everything explosive. But what's done is done. In the afternoon, I decided to reach out to Tina. I was extremely nervous she wouldn't want to hear from me, but I couldn't not try. I called her, fully prepared to get voicemail, but she actually answered. She was very quiet. I immediately told her, "I am so sorry for everything. You don't have to talk to me, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you." She was silent for a bit and then said, "I know you were trying to help me. I'm not mad at you for telling me. I'm mad it was so late." I confessed to her that I regretted not telling her sooner and explained that I'd been wrestling with that guilt for months. I also told her that I had urged Mark many times to come clean, which he obviously never did. She said, "I wish you had told me when you found out. It would have been easier than this." She wasn't yelling or anything. In fact, hearing how defeated and heartbroken she sounded was somehow worse than if she had screamed at me. I started crying again and said I was deeply sorry for the pain she's in. I asked how she was holding up. Tina told me she's with her parents and that she has an appointment to see a therapist later this week. Her friends helped arrange it. I gently asked if she had made any decisions about the relationship. She said, "There's no wedding. I told him I never want to speak to him right now." Apparently Mark had tried to call her and showed up at her parents' house the day after the canceled wedding, but her father told him to leave. She did read a text Mark sent, a long apology saying he was broken without her, that he'd do anything for a second chance, etc. She hadn't replied. I told her I understood if she never wanted to be with him again. She said quietly, "How could I ever trust him, or even trust what we had was real?" I didn't know how to answer that. We talked a bit more. I mostly listened as she vented through tears. She said things like, "I was so stupid. Everyone was excited for this wedding. Now I have to explain to my grandmother why it's not happening, and I put in so much effort and he threw it all away for a random hookup." She also said something that made me ache. "I'm glad I know. I am. But I wish I didn't have to find out like that, so close to what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life." I apologized again for my role in how she found out. She said, "You're not responsible for him cheating. I don't blame you for that. It's a lot. Before we hung up, she actually thanked me for telling her the truth. She said, "If you hadn't told me, I would have married him and not known what he was capable of. As much as this hurts, at least now I know what I'm dealing with." That gave me a bit of relief. At least, she doesn't hate me. In fact, she said she might reach out again once she's sorted her feelings, but right now she needs space from everyone. I told her to please take care of herself and that I'm here if she needs me, and that was that. As for my brother Mark, where do I even begin? After storming off that night, he effectively went AWOL for a day. My dad found out he stayed at his best man's house, the friend who organized the bachelor party. On what should have been his wedding night, Mark turned up back at my parents' house, apparently to talk to my parents and me. I wasn't there in person. I was at my apartment, so this is all relayed from my dad later. According to Dad, Mark was a mess. Red-eyed, unshaven, looking like he hadn't slept. I doubt he had. He came home and immediately started sobbing to Mom, apologizing for everything. They had a huge emotional conversation. Mom actually yelled at him, which I'm glad to hear, honestly. She told him she was deeply disappointed and that he betrayed all of our trust, not just Tina's. She also, somewhat surprisingly, laid into him about putting me in such a horrible position. She said something like, "Your sister was practically sick with guilt for months because of what you did, and you let her carry that alone." It's true. I hadn't even considered that angle from Mom's perspective. She's very family-oriented, and knowing Mark begged me to keep it secret probably upset her as much as the cheating itself. Apparently Mark acknowledged that and said he was sorry for involving me, though from my view I got involved by discovering it, not because he told me willingly. He kept saying he was sorry, that he messed up so bad, that he hates himself, etc. My dad told me when he asked Mark why he did it, Mark cried and said he didn't know, that he was drunk and stupid and insecure. Huh? Insecure how? And he felt like it was his last chance to do something crazy before settling down. Just writing that out makes me angry. What a pathetic excuse. Settling down with an amazing woman isn't enough excitement. You have to betray her to feel manly or something? Mom apparently then asked the big question, how many times? And was it just that one woman? She wanted full truth. Mark swore it was one time, one woman, never before and never since. He claims that after I confronted him, he cut off all contact with the other woman, and he's been faithful since. I want to believe that, but at this point, I'm not inclined to take his word for anything. Now about that other woman, Stacy. I never knew her, but from what I gather, she was some random person, maybe hired, or a friend of a friend, at the bachelor party. Mark did share one detail. Apparently she knew he was engaged and didn't care. Not that it lessens Mark's responsibility, but it shows the kind of person she is too. Well, guess who actually had the nerve to stir the pot again? Stacy. I didn't mention this earlier, but 2 days after the non-wedding, I got a message on Facebook from a stranger. It was Stacy. It said something snarky like, "Heard the wedding's off." I guess I'm not the only one who knows he's a cheater now. I was stunned. First, how did she even know the wedding was off? Possibly social media, or maybe, I later learned, one of Mark's idiot friends blabbed about the drama to someone and it got back to her. She went on to say, "For what it's worth, I felt bad after that night. But when he didn't mention a fiancé until the next morning, I realized he wasn't as good a guy as he seemed drunk. You did the right thing telling her." And then she actually had the gall to ask, "How is he?" I feel like this is partly my fault too. I did not respond. I have zero interest in engaging with her. I only mention this because it was like salt in the wound that this random woman felt the need to reach out to me. I blocked her after that. I also later told Mark about it. He cursed and said one of his ex-friends must have given Stacy info. He's since cut off at least one friend who was egging this on as gossip. Back to Mark. After his tearful apology to our parents, he asked if I would come over to talk to him. Initially, I honestly didn't want to. I needed my own space to process my anger. But at my dad's urging, I went to my parents' house that evening. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. Mark and I sat in the living room, with our parents kind of hovering in the kitchen, giving us privacy but obviously eavesdropping a bit, I'm sure. Mark looked like absolute crap. As soon as I sat down, he started crying again. He said, "I am so sorry. You were right. I should have told her. I shouldn't have put you in that position." He apologized over and over, which I appreciated, but it didn't erase what happened. I was pretty cold at first. I told him, "You realize what you did to me, to all of us. could have been avoided if you just hadn't cheated, or at least if you'd manned up and told her yourself long before it got to this. He said he knows. He knows. He said he was a coward and was selfish. He said I had every right to hate him. Then he did something I honestly didn't expect. He came over and tried to hug me. I was stiff as a board. I didn't hug back. He was sobbing onto my shoulder, saying, "I can't lose you too, please." This broke me a little. Despite how angry I am, he's still my brother, and seeing him utterly break down like that, I couldn't help but cry too. We kind of collapsed on the couch. I told him, "I don't hate you, but I hate what you did, and I don't know when, or if, things can ever be normal." He said he understood. We talked for a long while. I finally got to express all the resentment I'd been holding in. How hard it was for me to look Tina in the eye for months. How he made me complicit in hurting her. How the stress ate me alive. He listened and cried and apologized more. I do think he is genuinely remorseful now, but only because he faced consequences. Would he have been remorseful if I hadn't told and he got to marry her without issue? I don't know. I worry not. I asked him straight up, "What were you going to do? Just never tell her? Take it to the grave?" He said yes, that was his plan. I was too afraid to lose her. I almost did tell her a dozen times, but I just couldn't. I thought I could just be the perfect husband after, and make it up to her in my own way. I shook my head and said that was incredibly unfair to Tina, to take away her agency to decide if she wanted to marry a cheater. He agreed. He said, "I realize that now. I was only thinking of myself." I also confronted him about what he said to me in the heat of the moment, that I'm not his sister anymore, and all that. He immediately said he didn't mean it, he was lashing out, and hates himself for saying that. I told him words can't be unsaid, and that really hurt me deeply. He started crying again and said he'd spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to everyone for what he's done. By the end of this conversation, we were both emotionally exhausted. I did feel a small sense of relief. Like, at least we were able to talk, and he took responsibility, to me anyway. But things are nowhere near okay. He's absolutely shattered that Tina won't speak to him. Honestly, I think he's in the phase of realizing he may have permanently lost the best thing in his life. It's hard to watch as his sister, because a part of me wants to comfort him, stupid instinct. But another part is like, well, you brought it on yourself. One thing Mark said that stuck with me: "I wish you had just told her when you found out. It would have been horrible, but maybe less horrible than this." I responded, "I gave you the chance to do it. I trusted you to do it. That's my only regret, trusting your word." He nodded and didn't argue.